Next topic is generated value annotation. So where we are using generated value annotation, let's see in our code. Suppose let's make a new code for generated value annotation. Generated value. Close everything. What was generated value annotation is doing? So inside, before our column CID, we are providing generated value. What will happen if we are not going to provide this generated value? If we are not going to write this annotation generated value, then what will happen? Hibernate is not going to provide values automatically for this column. For this field CID, we are creating this column, and to make this column primary key, we are using this ID annotation. And if we are not going to write this generated value annotation, then what will happen is Hibernate is not going to give values automatically for every record that we are inserting for this primary key column. We have to insert primary key in every record by ourselves. And as you know, primary key column cannot be null. Primary key column cannot be null, and as well as primary key column cannot be duplicate. So for that, we are using this generated value annotation. So every time when we are going to insert value in this table, what this generated value will do? Through generated value annotation, what Hibernate is going to do, Hibernate will automatically provide numeric primary key for each value which is going to get inserted inside the corresponding row for this CID column. Again, what this Hibernate value is doing? Through this Hibernate value annotation, Hibernate is inserting value by itself automatically in the primary key column fields. But what will happen if we don't going to use this primary key generation annotation generated value? Hibernate is not going to insert any values inside the primary key column. But what will happen? JVM is going to insert the value. But when we are not going to provide any values, what JVM is going to insert for CID? CID is of type int. So by default, value is 0. What JVM is going to insert is 0. So when at first time, when we are going to insert our values through create operation, JVM is going to insert value inside the column CID, which is primary key. So what JVM is going to give? 0, because default value of CID is 0. But what at next time? What will happen in next time when we are going to insert some new values? For that, JVM is also going to give the 0 for CID. But then we are going to get duplicacy error, because in primary key, this CID is primary key. In primary key, we cannot have duplicate values. So JVM is going to give the values, but every time JVM will give 0, because by default CID is int and default value is 0. So at first time, in first row, the CID is going to be 0, which is coming from JVM. But when we are going to insert second row, it will give us duplicacy error because JVM is going to give 0, but in primary key column we cannot have duplicate values 0 and 0 two times. So let's run this. Let's drop the table, and remember here we are not using, it's commented, so Hibernate is not going to give the value for primary key column. Let's run only one. We are only providing one record, so you can see corresponding CID is going to be 0, corresponding primary key is going to be 0. So it's 0, it got inserted. But again, if we are going to insert this value again, then what will happen? JVM will try to insert the default values, which is going to be 0, but we are going to see errors because we cannot have 0 two times because this column CID is primary key. Duplicate entry 0 for key customer, which is primary key. So this is what happening if we are not writing this line of code, which is generated value. And if we are going to write this generated value, what will happen? Let's see. I think we have to create the table again. Okay, it run, so that's okay. So now we have 0. Again, if you are going to run this, that is going to be 2 because it is coming from Hibernate. It's 2. But how Hibernate is capable of doing this? What is the internal processing Hibernate is doing when we are writing this generated value? Do you remember the sequence concept? Sequence concept in database, in SQL databases. So what was happening in SQL concept is, sequence concept is that we are creating sequence in databases, our SQL databases, something like this. We used to create sequence in our databases like create sequence, sequence name, start with suppose 101, increment by 1. So this is what we used to write in our SQL databases to create sequence. And what sequence is doing there? Sequence is helping us in order to provide integer values to fulfill the primary key column. To fulfill the primary key column. This is what sequence is used for in case of databases. In case of MySQL or Oracle, we used to create sequence statement, create sequence, sequence name, and we tell it that you have to start with 101 and you have to increment by 1 at every time. So when we used to insert data inside our databases, and then at that time we are not going to provide values for that particular primary key column. What we used to do over there, so suppose this is primary key column, here other columns are. So at the time of inserting the value, what we are going to use, we are using insert into 111, but we have mentioned that you have to increment by 1, only 1. So in next value it is 102. in next value it is going to be 103. So this is what we use sequence for in our databases. But in generated value attribute, not attribute, it's annotation, what Hibernate is doing. Hibernate is also generating sequence internally. Hibernate is also generating sequence internally. But the tricky thing here is this sequence concept is only available in Oracle. If you are working with Oracle, you can see here in util, if you are working with Oracle, here we are working with MySQL. We are not working with Oracle. But the sequence concept is only available in Oracle. But here we are working with MySQL. So then again, internally what generated value is going to do? Because generated value is internally going to generate sequence automatically. We don't have to generate sequence through this line of queries by ourselves. Internally, this will get executed by the Hibernate. But again, the problem is we are not working with Oracle. We are working with MySQL, and this sequence concept is already only available in Oracle. So what will happen? Instead of creating sequence, Hibernate is going to create table. Instead of creating sequence, because we are working with MySQL, when we are working with MySQL and we are using this generated value annotation, then Hibernate is going to generate table, not sequence. So let's run this code. What is happening? Hibernate is generating one table, not sequence, because we are working with MySQL. Let's drop the tables first. And we are inserting this one value. Let's see, is that two table is going to get created? Because internally when we are working with this generated value annotation, then it is going to create one table. So you can see we created our customer table. So tables, here we got two table. How we got two table? We only provided value inside customer and saved the customer object. But Hibernate internally is generating one more table, which is Hibernate sequence. So let's see what is inside Hibernate sequence. So in customer, this value got inserted, and in Hibernate sequence table, we have two. From where these two come? Right here. To understand that, let's go through console. When we run the insert statement, create statement, then these are the things that happened. These are the things that happened internally through Hibernate runtime system. What happened? Create table customer. One customer table got created. Create table Hibernate sequence. So there is another table that got created through Hibernate. Why? Because we have written this generated value annotation. Again, what happened? These two table got created. Then one insert statement got issued. One insert statement got issued, and in which it is getting issued for Hibernate sequence table. For this table, Hibernate sequence table, there is one insert statement. Again, in next step, what happened? One select statement got issued. What is inserted when insert statement got issued? One was inserted, but right now it is two. you can see there is no 1. So what happened? One statement got issued, insert statement. 1 is now there inside this Hibernate sequence table. Then one select statement got issued from the Hibernate sequence table, So again, in next step, one update statement got issued for Hibernate sequence. And then again, in the last, what happened? Insert statement for customer got issued. So let me tell you what happened. Internally, when we have written the generated value annotation, then Hibernate is going to generate the table because we are working with MySQL, not Oracle. So what happened? These two tables got created, and in this, for this Hibernate sequence table, one value got inserted, and the value was at that time 1. Two table got created, one value got inserted. Then what happened? One select statement got issued. So this one got selected, and then one update statement for this Hibernate sequence got issued. So 1 is selected, and then with update statement, it becomes 2. 1 becomes 2. And the 1 which was selected before updating this value, where that is going? That is going inside customer table. Insert into customer table. Because this is responsible, this line is responsible, generated value is responsible, it is there for providing the value for primary key, which is CID. So the one which is selected is inserted right here 1, and this become 2. Now again, if we are going to insert a new record, what is going to happen? One select statement will be issued. So 2 is going to be get selected, then one update statement is going to get issued, 2 will become 3, and one insert statement will be issued for customer. So this 2 is going to get inserted in here in the next value, in next CID, and it will become 3. Look, one select statement got issued from the Hibernate sequence table, then that 2 is getting updated to 3 with this update statement right here, and the selected value, which is 2, that is got selected in this select statement, is going to get inserted as CID for customer, as primary key for customer. Let me run. So it becomes 3 and one value, and the 2 which was previous one got inserted right here in customer. Now again, if we are going to run this code again, what will happen? First, this 3 is going to get selected, and then this 3 will get updated to 4, and the 3 which is been selected is going to inserted right here as the next primary key for this CID column in the customer table. So again, let's go to here. Now you know what this line is doing, but you still don't know what this generation type auto is saying. The auto is saying that Hibernate can switch automatically on the basis of, if we are working with Oracle, then it is going to get switched to sequence. So instead of auto, what we can write here? We can write identity. You know what is identity? For different tables, different Hibernate sequence table is going to get created. What will happen with identity? Suppose we have a student and course table. Then for student table, the primary key is going to start from 1 2, 3, 4, and also for course, it is going to start from 1. Primary key is going to start from 1, not from the value where student is left. Suppose student is left at 4, then in course it is not going to get start from 5. Primary key in course is also going to get start from 1. That will happen with identity. So what this auto identity sequence and table is saying, it is saying that Hibernate should automatically switch on the basis of which database we are working. If we are working with Oracle, in that case, if we have auto, then by default it is going to switch on sequence. We can also write here sequence, but right now what we did, we have written here sequence, but we are working with Oracle. We are not working with Oracle database, we are working with MySQL database, and in MySQL database there is no concept of sequence. So we have to work with table because we are working with MySQL database. So this is kind of hard. So instead of mentioning sequence and table, what we are going to do, we are going to let it be on auto. So when it is on auto, what Hibernate is going to do, it is by default automatically internally going to switch between sequence and table as per the corresponding database we are working with. So we are here, we are working with MySQL. If we are going to let it auto, then internally Hibernate will get that we are working with database MySQL, and internally for that it will create table. But suppose if we are working with Oracle and we have written, then what Hibernate is going to do, if we are working with Oracle, then by default Oracle, this auto is going to get converted into sequence, and this line of code is not going to create the table at that time. This line of code is going to create the sequence, but right now it's MySQL. So when we are at auto, Hibernate will select table by default internally, and it will create one table to provide value in this primary key, because MySQL doesn't have sequence concept. So this is what till this line is saying. But wait a minute, sequence is not only limited to these type of things. When we are working with sequence in case of database, like this example we discussed here, with the sequence, what we can do is we can tell the sequence that from which value you have to start with 101. So it doesn't have to start from 1, it have to start from 101, and then we can say in sequence that increment by 1. Suppose there is 101, then you have to increment by 2 in next insert. Suppose here is 10, then what will happen? After 101, the next value for this primary key is going to be 111, 111, because it is incrementing by 10. So these are the two things that should be available inside the sequence, because right here this generated value is generating sequence internally. In case if it is MySQL, we are working with MySQL, then it is going to create table, otherwise it is going to create sequence in case of Oracle. But here we are not able to write these specifications of sequence. We want to tell that you have to start with 101 and you have to increment by 1, maybe 10, maybe 100 from 101 the next value is going to be 201. There have to be some way by which we can tell right here, because this is also sequence. Hibernate is also internally creating sequence. So how to do that? So to do that, you can say that we are trying to create custom primary key. You can say we are trying to create custom primary key. You have to write here generator and then you have to give it a name. You have to give it a name. Suppose pk generator. It represents primary key generator. Then again at next line you have to use the annotation sequence generator. SEQUEN sequence generator. In this annotation you have to write again name. You have to write this name pk generator here. Then again in next attribute you can say you have to write sequence name, which is going to be, let's say, SEQNAME. And then in next attribute you have to write initial value. Initial value is suppose 101. What is this initial value? This is same as start with. In case of database we are using start with. In here we are using initial value, and at the place of increment by we are going to use allocation size. So allocation size is suppose 10. Now what is going to happen? Let's drop the table and let's see, is it working? Drop table, create table, use table. We are inserting some values. Suppose here only one value is getting inserted. Let's see the table name that is going to get created. One table for customer is getting generated, and then the other table that is being generated is sequence name. What it is showing? It shows that the table name that is by default getting generated previously was Hibernate sequence, but now we can give the name for this table that is internally getting generated, and the name is sequence name, which we provided right here, sequence name. And then what happened? One value got inserted inside this table, which is 101. So we tell it that you have to initialize from 101. Then it got selected, it got updated, and then that selected value is inserted inside our customer. Let's see. Inside our customer. So now our primary key is starting with 101, not with 1. We can make custom primary key generation through this line of codes. So it is 101, and let's also see what is in that sequence name table. So inside sequence name table right now is 1 to 1. Let's run the insertion code again. Now we are inserting again some values. Let's see what will happen. Customer. The next value that got inserted in this primary key column field is 112. What this means? That it is getting incremented by, which is allocation size means incremented by 10. So 101 got incremented by 10 for the next insertion. So now here we have 112. So here by this line of code we are able to have command on the sequence that is internally getting generated through this line of code, through generated value annotation. What we did at generated value annotation, we provided this name, and inside this sequence generator we connected this sequence generator annotation with this name, which means with the table that is going to get generated internally, and in that sequence generator annotation we provided the name for the table, because internally the table which is getting generated is named as Hibernate underscore sequence. Now sequence name is going to be named for that table, and initial value is 101, so it is not going to be from 1, and the increment by, that is allocation size, is going to be 10. So whenever we are going to insert new values, it is going to be get incremented by 10. So this is what generated value annotation is all about. All these things you can do with the help of generated value annotation. So we have gone through generated value annotation.